When you think of the greatest NFL teams, the ones that come to mind are the ones that dominated their era. The 2007 New England Patriots, the 2013 Seattle Seahawks, or the 2019 Kansas City Chiefs. But today, we're talking about a team that doesn't get mentioned nearly as often, even though it arguably deserves to be. This is the story of the 2010 San Diego Chargers, a team that on paper was one of the greatest in NFL history, yet somehow managed to miss the playoffs. This isn't just a story about bad luck or a few missed opportunities. This is about a team that did almost everything right but still fell short in the most frustrating way imaginable. So, how did this happen? How did a team that boasted the league's #1 offense and defense in the same season end up sitting at home during the playoffs? Get ready as we break down the journey of the 2010 Chargers, their unbelievable strength, their catastrophic downfall, and the one often overlooked aspect of the game that led to their demise. To understand the Chargers' 2010 collapse, you've got to look back at 2009. They finished the season with a 13-3 record, rolling into the playoffs as one of the top seeds in the AFC. They had a high-powered offense that led by Philip Rivers, who threw for 4,254 yards and 28 touchdowns that season. They also had LaDainian Tomlinson, the 2006 MVP, who was still a significant part of the offense, though his production had started to decline. Despite their regular season success, they were knocked out of the playoffs in the divisional round by the New York Jets. It was a tough loss, but expectations for 2010 remained sky high. Even with Tomlinson leaving for the New York Jets, the Chargers felt confident they could make another deep playoff run, especially with the emergence of rookie running back Ryan Matthews, who they drafted 12th overall. Matthews was supposed to step in and help fill the void left by Tomlinson, alongside the bruising fullback Mike Tolbert. Most analysts agreed the Chargers were primed for a Super Bowl run, but little did anyone know the 2010 season would take a wild and unexpected turn. Let's start with the offense. Philip Rivers was at the peak of his career in 2010, and his numbers showed it. He had led the entire NFL in passing yards, racking up 4,710 yards, which was not just impressive, it was historic. Rivers joined the ranks of quarterbacks like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, leading the league in passing yards while maintaining a passer rating of 101.8. He threw 30 touchdowns to just 13 interceptions, averaging 8.7 yards per attempt, one of the highest marks in the league. Rivers didn't just make magic happen by himself though. His primary target was Antonio Gates, one of the greatest tight ends in NFL history. Despite missing 6 games due to injury, Gates still managed 50 receptions for 782 yards and 10 touchdowns. He was a key red zone target, and his ability to make tough catches in the middle of the field made him nearly unstoppable when healthy. In addition to Gates, Rivers spread the ball around to a variety of targets, including Malcolm Floyd and Vincent Jackson. Even with Jackson missing 11 games due to contract disputes, the Chargers' receiving core was still potent enough to consistently make big plays. On the ground, the Chargers didn't have a single standout running back, but they got solid production from both Ryan Matthews and Mike Tolbert. Matthews, the rookie, finished the season with 676 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns, while Tolbert chipped in with 735 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns. Between them, they combined for over 1,400 rushing yards and 18 touchdowns, giving the Chargers a balanced offensive attack. As a unit, the Chargers' offense was the best in the league in terms of yardage, averaging 395.8 yards per game. They had the second best passing offense in the NFL, putting up 282.4 yards per game through the air. They outgained opponents by over 2,000 yards over the course of the season, a staggering margin. To put that in perspective, teams with that kind of offensive firepower almost always make the playoffs. In fact, the Chargers' offense ranked higher in yardage than the 2000 New England Patriots, the 2007 Denver Broncos, and the 2019 Kansas City Chiefs, all teams that made it to the Super Bowl. But despite all this, the Chargers couldn't translate those yards into enough wins. How is that possible? While the offense was putting up record numbers, the defense was just as dominant. In fact, it's extremely rare for a team to lead up the league in both offensive and defensive yardage, but the Chargers did just that. Under the direction of Ron Rivera, the defense became a juggernaut. The Chargers allowed the fewest passing yards in the NFL, giving up just 177.8 yards per game through the air. They also ranked 4th in rushing defense, allowing only 93.8 yards per game on the ground. In total, the Chargers allowed a league-low 271.8 yards per game, making them them the top defense in terms of yardage. The pass rush was anchored by Pro Bowl linebacker Sean Phillips, who tallied 11 sacks on the season. The secondary was locked down by veteran cornerbacks Quentin Jammer and Antoine Cason, while safety Eric Weddle patrolled the middle of the field. Opponents found it nearly impossible to move the ball against the Chargers, whether they were trying to pass it or run. So how could a team with such a dominant defense, combined with a top-tier offense, finish the season with a 9-7 record? Here's where everything fell apart. The Chargers special teams unit was nothing short of a disaster. And it's not an exaggeration to say that their special teams performance was historically bad. They ranked dead last in almost every major special teams category, from punt coverage to kickoff returns. The problem started early, in Week 1 against the Kansas City Chiefs. Despite outgaining the Chiefs by over 200 yards, the Chargers lost, thanks in large part to the 94-yard punt return touchdown by Dexter McCluster. That wasn't a one-off incident either. It was a sign of things to come. By Week 3, the Chargers special teams issues had become a full-blown crisis. In a game against the Seattle Seahawks, Leon Washington returned with kickoff for touchdowns, helping Seattle win 27-20, despite being outgained by nearly 300 yards. Allowing 2 kickoff returns, touchdown in a single game is almost unheard of. But for the Chargers, it was just another example of how their special teams were costing the game. The nightmare continued in Week 5 against the Oakland Raiders. The Chargers had 2 punts blocked in the same game, leading directly to points for the Raiders. Despite once again outgaining their opponent in total yardage, the special teams blunders handed Oakland 9 points, and the Chargers lost by 8. In total, the Chargers gave up 4 touchdowns on special teams over the course of the season, including 3 on kickoff returns and 1 on a punt return. They also had 5 punts blocked, the most in the league. They finished the season ranked 32nd in special teams efficiency, according to Football Outsiders, and allowed opponents an average of 11.3 yards per punt return, another league worst. The Chargers' 2010 season remained one of the greatest statistical anomalies in NFL history. Yardage differential, essentially how many more yards a team gains than it allows, is one of the best predictors of success in the NFL. Typically, teams that dominate in yardage are almost guaranteed to make the playoffs. Chargers outgained their opponents by over 2,000 yards, a margin that ranked as one of the best in the modern era. The yardage differential of plus 2,035 was the highest in the NFL that year, and it set a modern NFL record for yardage differential through the first 5 games of the season. For context, teams with a yardage differential like that generally win at least 12 games and often make deep playoff runs. The 2007 Patriots, for example, had a differential of plus 2,031 and went 16-0 in the regular season. But for the Chargers, this statistical dominance didn't translate into wins, thanks in large part to their special teams failures. Looking back, the 2010 Chargers are a cautionary tale of how one neglected aspect of the game can undo an otherwise dominant team. Their offense and defense were among the best the NFL has ever seen, but their special teams are historically bad, and that untimely cost them a chance at the playoffs. Philip Rivers had one of the best seasons of his career, and yet it ended in heartbreak. Rivers threw for over 4,700 yards and 30 touchdowns, yet his legacy remained tied to missed opportunities. The 2010 season was perhaps the best chance Rivers ever had to win a Super Bowl, and it slipped away due to factors outside his control. Special teams coach Steve Crosby, a veteran with over 30 years experience, came under intense scrutiny for the unit's failures. While it's hard to place all the blame on one person, the consistency of the special teams mistakes make it impossible to ignore. The 2010 Chargers season leaves us with a lot of what ifs. What if they had just an average special teams unit? Could they have gone all the way to the Super Bowl? Statistically, they had all the makings of a championship team. A single extra win would have put them in the playoffs. And with their offense and defense clicking, who knows how far they could have gone. Instead, they remain one of the most baffling what could have been teams in NFL history. Their story is a reminder that football is about all 3 phases of the game. And even a team that does everything right on offense and defense can be undone by a neglected special teams unit. Let us know what you think about the 2010 Chargers. Were they the greatest team to miss the playoffs? Or were they doomed by their own mistake? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the story with fellow football fans.